Hello, this is Brain Science Video on Blast from the Past, and it's Jennifer Smith here.
And Andy, hi everybody.
And we're excited to teach you about the crazy spin. So let's start out with this question. Why do people fail in their goals and relationships? It's because they haven't been trained in emotional self-mastery and the subtle and negative influences. I'm going to ask you a question here. What are you fighting for?
We're not talking about what me and my brother used to do, right?
No, and let me ask you, why are you fighting? And why don't you just give up? So no, we're not talking about this.
Yeah, me and my brother used to fight like this. Put on the boxing gloves and go at it. Or sometimes not. We just go at it.
So we're also not talking about fighting in our relationships, not boxing or relationship troubles. What we're talking about here is, what do you value in your life that is worth fighting for on a daily basis? So maybe you value a healthy mind, body, and finances. Perhaps you value joyful, successful relationships. Maybe you value love, kindness, honesty, and patience. Or you might value tidiness, order, peace, and tranquility. Those are some of my favorites. And you might value enjoying each day to its fullest. Now, these values often guide our lives and our decisions. And, sometimes we have these New Year's resolutions. And this woman here, imagine that she made this New Year's resolution to get healthier, to get up and go to the gym, to eat healthier. And how many times do we make these New Year's resolutions and goals? And we're so excited the night before, really passionate about it. And the morning comes, the alarm goes off, and she thinks, what a stupid goal this was, right?
Looks to me like she already overslept an hour, maybe two.
And so a lot of times it's easy to see how we might fail in these types of goals, but also those more important ones of having healthy relationships where we want to have calm, peaceful, happy communication rather than yelling and kind of feeling out of control and feeling like emotionally charged. And we often get caught up in the craziness. And you know what? It's because we're literally out of our minds. And that's what we're going to talk to you about here too. And the fact that we are all of, pretty good intelligence here. You're in this academy with us, and so you're intelligent. You're here to grow and to learn. And so we think, why that we're smart people, we end up doing stupid things that go against our values that we do, or we say things that we regret, and we just don't get those goals. And why is that?
So it has to do with simple brain functions. Or maybe it's complex brain functions.
Complex. Some good old brain science here for you.
So the brain, the way it is built, it functions either with electrical impulses or chemical reactions. And so what we're going to talk about, this little brain function that we're talking about today, is based on the chemical reactions in the brain.
And so you'll see the prefrontal cortex there. The frontal lobe is where our values reside and where we have our imagination and our creativity.
Problem solving.
And then the middle brain, if we slip back into that.
So the middle brain is what controls our life-sustaining functions. They call it the animal brain partly because animals, they exist, they're in survival mode pretty much all the time in the wild. And so they function with that part of the brain. So when you're in survival mode, did you want to say that part there?
Well, basically, we can go into the fight, flight, or freeze, and we're going to talk about a little bit more about that towards the end of this video. But yeah, we're acting more like an animal when we slip back into the middle brain there.
So feelings, emotions is the other part that is controlled in that area of the brain. So that's why we're going to talk about that.
All right, so the next slide, Tom and Jane. All right, I'm going to, as we teach you about this crazy spin, this function of the brain, and how it shows up in achieving goals and in having those relationships we desire, I'm going to use Tom and Jane's story to illustrate each of these steps here. So let me just start out by saying, imagine that Jane has been home, she's been with the kids, kind of had a hectic day, and Tom comes home from work and just wants to have a conversation with his beautiful wife, Jane, and he starts talking in a monotone kind of voice. And so with that story set up, we'll move on to this first step of the crazy spin.
So this is an interesting picture. Back in 1957, Coca-Cola Company wanted to experiment with advertising. And they come up with this bright idea that they could cut out one frame of the movie being shown anywhere randomly throughout the movie. They'd cut out one frame and insert a picture of what's at the snack bar. And so they did that and got even better results than what they ever expected. It definitely increased visits to the snack bar and sales. However, the people never knew what they were watching. As the film goes by at 26 frames per second, that one frame is completely missed by your conscious mind, but it registers subconsciously. So it's a subliminal message that really had some drastic results in advertising. Supposedly it was outlawed, but you can find it all over the place still in advertising today. Subliminal advertising. So the first step in this crazy spin cycle is exactly that. You get flashed with a subliminal message of some kind, and that begins the whole spin.
And the source?
The source of the flash can come from a lot of different things. It can be something that caught your eye but didn't consciously catch your eye. You could be in a room full of crowded people, everybody talking, and a word could have flashed something, and you never, with all that, the white noise kind of stuff, with all that talking, that one word maybe registered subconsciously and started this spin cycle. It could be a tone of voice, it could be a smell. And we know that with a lot of the negative influences in our world today, that there is a very intelligent force behind some of this negative influence that we face. And you can call that whatever you want. But this intelligence negative influence can be sending messages to us all the time. And that's where a lot of these flashes come from.
So if we go back to Tom and Jane's story, Jane is having this subliminal flash due to Tom speaking in his monotone voice. That is the trigger that is causing her to go into this crazy spin.
So as I mentioned, part of the brain function is chemical reactions. So this subliminal message that gets flashed in your mind creates a chemical reaction. And that's what we call the second step of this crazy spin cycle, is a drip of chemical that is caused by that subliminal flash. Now, everybody has experienced this before. However, one drip of chemical is really hard to detect, but I think you've all experienced a rush of chemicals. So if you've ever been driving at night, and sometimes during the day, but it's a lot more dramatic when it's at night, because these pretty red and blue lights that flash in your rearview mirror, and whoa, there you are. Suddenly there is a whole spill and rush of chemicals. You have felt that. So you know what a rush of chemicals feels like. And so having experienced that is a rush. when you have a rush of chemicals, you definitely know what's going on. However, with just the drip, one drip of chemical, your brain reacts to that, but you might not even be aware yet what's going on. And so you get a little bit of a feeling with that chemical that's just been dripped. Just like you noticed, if you've ever experienced that flashing in your rearview mirror, what that feels like. Or maybe if you haven't had that experience, maybe you've had the experience of someone sneaking up behind you and poking you in the ribs with a ah, and how do you react to that, and how does that feel? That produces a rush of chemicals, and you definitely can identify some feelings that are there. But with a subliminal flash, you get just a little tiny drip of chemical, which produces a tiny bit of a feeling. And your brain is designed to answer questions and solve mysteries. And when there's just a partial something there, you're unsure. And so you want to figure that out. What is this? What's going on here? Your brain starts to search.
So back to Tom and Jane's story, as Tom's speaking in his monotone voice, Jane's just feeling a little bit off. She doesn't know why. And so, yeah, her brain is trying to figure out what's going on here.
So try to decipher this message. From past experience, I know you've already got that one figured out. There's some missing information there. And if you're like the average person, it took you about as quick as you can normally read to decipher that message. Can you read this? Then your brain is fine. Even though there was missing information there, just like that one little chemical drip just produced one little tiny bit of a emotion, a little bit of a feeling, it wasn't complete. So your brain goes to the filing cabinet. Everything that you've ever experienced in your whole life, through all of your senses, has been recorded in your brain. And just imagine that it's all in that nice little filing cabinet. And when you have this little drip of chemical, your brain wants to search and find out, what does that chemical mean? What's going on with that? And so it's looking to complete, just like your brain did. There's missing information here. Your brain completed it, filled in the gaps, and you got a correct message. However,
let's try this new one for them.
Take a few seconds, maybe longer than a few seconds, and see if you can decipher this. Now, there have been a few people that have been able to do this, come up with this. However, most people, when they try to read this message, they start saying things like, no name on my desk, no name in the disk, something like that. That's not very accurate. Your brain did the best that it could with the information and the experiences that you've had to fill in the gaps there, and it's not very accurate. If you have never had experience with the Japanese language, this is very hard to decipher. This is Japanese, it's sentence in Japanese, written with English letters, but it says, Anata no namae wa nan desu ka, which simply means, what is your name? So if you guessed name as one of those words, that was just coincidence that in Japanese, the word name is pronounced namaya, and it's N-A-M-A-E, which you could have luckily got that as N-A-M-E for name. It's close. Your brain did a pretty good job coming up with that. And so that is the 4 steps to this crazy spin cycle. You get a flash, produces one little drip of chemical. That is a mystery a little bit, a question to be answered by your brain. What does this chemical mean? Goes to your filing cabinet to try to complete the information. Most of the time it is not very accurate, and that inaccurate information becomes the next flash of some negative information because it's inaccurate. That produces another drip, a little bit more of the feeling, and that cycle continues, and it spins, and it happens very quickly in the brain. And
So let's go back to Tom and Jane's story here. When we look at this filing cabinet, and her brain went back to that filing cabinet to try and figure out the last time my husband came home and was talking in a monotone voice, we ended up in a fight. And so as she gets spun in this crazy spin, literally getting out of her mind second by second, she starts to raise her voice to her husband. And then usually what happens with that, then he raises his voice and she raises her voice even more. And now they're literally in a fight because her brain was trying to fill in the missing pieces. And all Tom wanted to do was come home and just share about his day. So not that any of us has ever experienced that before. So let's conclude back with the brain slide again.
Brain chemicals equals emotions. Every emotion that you've ever felt, negative or positive, painful or pleasant, is all a chemical reaction in the brain. And that whole cycle, the crazy spin cycle, is a way of negative influences manipulating your brain functions, your brain chemistry, to produce chemicals that will be painful and unpleasant. And those kinds of chemical reactions put that purple region, the frontal lobe, the prefrontal cortex, where your reasoning is, your logic and your value systems all reside in that part of the brain. Those painful, uncomfortable brain chemicals put that part of the brain to sleep.
So if we go back to Tom and Jane's story and realize that Jane had slipped back into her animal brain, her frontal lobe wasn't functioning because it was asleep. And so when we get into that animal brain mode, we can go into fight, flight, or freeze, just like the animals. And so the story that we shared is Tom and Jane ended up in the fight. What if Jane would have gone into the flight mode? Perhaps she would have just left the room or ran out of the house and just been upset in tears for the flash that she had had, or she could have gone into freeze mode where we just kind of shut down, we don't engage in the conversation.
Silent treatment.
Silent treatment, that's a big one. And so we are going to share more in the next video, how to use this information you've learned about the crazy spin in a more practical way by learning about the chemical slide.
We want to teach you how to keep those two parts of the brain in balance, because we need both parts working together. And when you have an overdose of the right chemicals, your frontal lobe goes to sleep and you are thinking out of your feeling brain, which doesn't work very well. And you're making decisions, you're doing and saying things out of that middle part of your brain, and your values aren't there, your reasoning's not there, and that's why smart people tend to do stupid things, because they're not working out of the correct part of their brain.
So we'll teach you how to keep the mind and the heart in balance to have more successful relationships and encounters with your spouse. So talk to you soon. Bye.